Today I'll be teaching you how to paint verdigris using both oil and acrylic paints. So let us waste no more time and start with the oil paint method. As you'll see, I have already given my model its corresponding base coats. But before I start working on the verdigris effect, I want to first get to a classic finish on the bronze before I start to weather it. This was done in a quick and easy manner through a dark wash, and a dry brush to polish any raised details that might have lightly darkened down. Now that I have a very basic bronze surface to work on, I can start applying the oils, for which I've chosen a mix of Viridian hue and titanium white to achieve the verdigris color. This mix was diluted with some odorless white spirits and applied over all of the metal as we would with any other wash. Now, oil paints will take a while to dry, but after a couple of minutes, the solvent we added will have evaporated to something that looks something like this. It is now that we can take a makeup sponge and start to clean the patina from the raised details, preferably in a downward motion so to create some light streaks running down, but I'll be adding some more later on. For any hard to reach areas, we can cut the makeup sponge to make it smaller or use an eyeshadow applicator. The process thus far is something very basic, which you might have already seen, and while it is alright, it is only a fraction of what oil paints allow us to do. So, back to the palette, I'll add some more titanium white to the previous mix, and use this lighter tone to start working on the streaks. First, I will apply the paint a bit more selectively than before, focusing on some but not all of the recesses, as I still want some of the previous layer to show through, in order to create a more chromatically rich effect, which will separate this paint job from your everyday lazy wash. And after a couple of minutes, when the solvent has evaporated like it did for the previous layer, is when the magic begins. By simply using a clean dry brush and dragging the oil downwards, the streaks will begin to form. It really is as simple as it looks. The only variable will be the length and width of your streaks, which will depend on how much oil you applied. But as you'll see next, applying a bit too much won't be an issue. I am now using a different brush with some white spirits on it, and with it I can both clean and shape the previous streaks to my liking. The brush, however, will begin to pick up oil as we clean and shape, so we want to refresh it with some white spirits every couple passes. But if you pay attention, you can actually see me using it to add extra thin lines here and there. It will take some hours for the oils to fully dry, so you can play around with them without fear of running out of time. It might seem intimidating at first, but once you let go, you'll see how easy and fun it really is. Plus, we can always clean everything up with some white spirits and start all over again. Off camera, I ended up repeating this step, adding even more titanium white to the mix, to have even more variety. And finally, I can use the sponge once again to lightly graze the raised surfaces and clean the oils from them. Here is the look I settled for in the end. I think I overdid the effect by about 20%, but I am happy with the experience I got out of this attempt. However, for those who'd rather keep it classic, let's have a look at how I got this finish using only acrylics. But before that, I'll quickly like to mention where I got these models from, and it's from none other than Daka Store, who after their successful Torquemada Inquisition release now bring us a more Cthulhu-inspired project in the Disciples of Tet-O. Their Kickstarter will be linked in the description, so you can check out both their Trench Crusade, Heretic Legion and Black Grail inspired factions. The setup will be quite different, as I'll be starting out from a bluish base on the metallics, and to add a pinch of extra detail, I'll continue with an overall wash of a lighter tone. Once the wash is dry, as you might have guessed, I'll be dry brushing the whole surface with my bronze, and afterwards polish the edges with a lighter metallic. Because the process so far is a bit messy between the dry brush and the washes, I decided to leave the rest of the base coat for later, just in case any spillovers occurred. Similar to the result after the first sponge cleaning with the oils, we now have a very simple effect, but let's see how to approach adding the extra details and some more color to it. Unlike with the oils, this process won't be a simple matter of flicking our brush up and down, and will require a degree of brush control, but more importantly, the correct amount of paint in your brush. On one hand, we want a decent amount of dilution and load for the paint to flow into the recesses due to capillary action, and create spots where more patina has built up. something commonly referred as a controlled wash. For the streaks, however, we want to unload as much paint as possible from the brush, allowing us to work with a very fine tip, as well as keeping the paint transparent so it won't be as strong as the value of the recesses, this way separating the streaks from the patina. I decided to leave a bit more footage than usual for this step, in order to give you a realistic idea of what you're getting into if you decide to try out this effect. Like I said, there is no trick here, but at the same time it is not an impossible effect to achieve. It is only a matter of sitting down and enjoying the tranquility of taking your mind away from the real world, and instead focusing on your hobby one layer at a time. Afterwards, I repeated the effect using a lighter color, with more dilution and less paint on the brush so to make sure I could get within the previous streaks. It is important to note that most of my time was spent on the shield, since not only does it provide a wide surface to work on, but it is also a key feature of the model. Remember that in a paint job, not every surface has to receive the same amount of attention. If you reached this point, thank you for sticking around all the way till the end. I hope you found the video useful and that it may help you achieve better paint jobs in the future.